A painter is like a musician who would need to create their own notes before playing an instrument. How many keys do you want on your piano? Think about it well, because if you don't have enough, it will make some songs unplayable. And if you have too many, your piano will just be too large and will not fit in the room. It's the same thing for painters. Too few colors and your palette can actually be counterproductive if it causes your mixtures to become too restricted and all your paintings start to look the same. Likewise, having too many tubes can clutter your mixing decisions and lead to confusion. Confusion. I've been there, my friends. I've tried them all. The limited palettes, the crowded ones, and I finally came up with my optimal go-to palette that I've been using ever since I became a professional artist. 15 pigments, that's all I need to paint most of the things I ever need to paint as a professional figurative painter. It took a lot of fine-tuning to come up with this selection, and today I want to talk about what makes these colors the best in my opinion, and how you can come up with your own go-to palette based on your own practice. And if you have no idea where to start from, you can try mine. But first, it would be great if you could share your palette in the comments section. This way we'll see what everybody is using, just for curiosity's sake, and maybe this video and your comment will help change a couple things. First, you have to know that it's pretty normal to not stick to the same selection of pigments for your entire career. In the beginning, it's best to try only limited palettes in the spirit of the Atelier approach, which favors control over chaos all the time, methodical approach. Instead of relying on convenience colors like premixed, purples, peach tones, grass greens, premixed skin colors, all this stuff, the idea for a beginner is to focus more on learning how to mix what you need with what you have. And very often this is best done with just a few pigments, as it makes learning this key mixing skill much easier. So should you be worried that you're going to be starting painting and you will not have enough pigments to mix anything? No, you shouldn't worry about that. You can look at the old masters, for example. They often worked with a surprisingly limited set of pigments, many of which were earth tones or natural mineral based, easy to find. Not so surprising when you think that these limitations were mostly due to availability. We are really spoiled today with thousands of colors to choose from thanks to modern chemistry, but it hasn't always been like that. And yet, if you look at their paintings, the old masters painted really well with this relatively limited selection. A limited selection that was forced by nature, and that forced them to be disciplined and to really understand color mixing and color relationships. As I said, now we are blessed with modern palettes that offer vibrancy and intensity, but with great power, as they say, come great responsibility or risk of confusion for beginners. For a beginner, piling up tubes can easily lead to discordant colors, muddy mixtures, or just plain confusion. So simplification, when done right, isn't a limitation, especially for a beginner. It's a training method. It helps you understand the logic of color. So for a beginner, what you want is to get the feeling of how color mixing works first, and then incorporate some new pigments progressively. The key idea is that you want to progressively incorporate new pigments in your selection to lift off some of the limitations of the limited palettes that you've started with. So you try your hands on the limited palette, and when you add a paint tube to your selection, you know exactly why you need it, and this is crucial. For example, let's say that you start and practice with the following limited palette that I recommend: an extremely reduced yet functional classical skin tones palette that you can begin with today and just try it. It's titanium white, transparent iron oxide or transparent red oxide, PR101, and ultramarine blue. This super limited set of colors allows you to create surprising realism, especially in portraits and figures. So try using that first. Just have fun, do a couple studies, and you'll be forced to solve some key color problems with what you have. Subtle temperature shifts, clean mixing, value precision. Try painting a couple figure studies, portraits with these 3 paint tubes really, and you'll see that it's surprisingly good. It looks muted and a little bit washed out, but it's very decent if your values are on point. And in the beginning, very often it's the most important thing. But of course, it can't cover all your color needs down the line. And at some point, you'll feel the limitations. You will naturally start to feel it at some point. You'll think, okay, I need to find a way to create a bright green. I need to find a way to make my skin tones more pink. I can't do it with this transparent iron oxide. So how do I do that? And this is where you're going to go on the look for other pigments outside of the range of this limited palette. And this is how you're going to go on the hunt for some new pigments. See, once the main principles are ingrained, you can expand. When you do, you will add the colors very strategically, not just because they look pretty in the tube. Of course, color is a complex subject, and I know that it can be intimidating to get into. If you need help figuring out the essentials such as mixing, theory, harmony, you can check out my advanced color course. It comes with lots of great resources and detailed demonstrations explaining portrait, still life, and landscape. So now that you've explored a classical palette, which is great to learn with, let me introduce you to my own pigment selection, my go-to pigment selection. It's a modern and an all-around palette that can mix anything you want. If you don't know where to start, you can try it. So how did I come up with this selection of pigments? To understand this, you need to understand this color wheel that you can download for free on my website. And I based my pigment selection on this color wheel. The key thing here is that I came up with the color wheel first and tried to find the right pigments around it so that they cover the entire circle. What I did is I tried to sort out all the colors that the human eye is capable of seeing, and I tried to find pigments that would work to cover the entire spectrum as well as possible, and also the most useful pigments for everyday use. It doesn't mean that I need all of them all the time, anytime I paint. In fact, some of them I very rarely use, but you know, when I do need them, I'm happy to find them somewhere in my stockpile. After years of trial and error, I came up with this selection that I can now really recommend. It strikes a useful balance between the benefits of the limited classical training and the vibrancy offered by modern pigments. So here it is. So for my white, I mostly use titanium white. I know a lot of people suggest flake white, and flake white is also really good, but I live in the EU and it's not easily available because of the lead oxide that it contains. So here you just have to learn how to work properly with titanium white, and I became really good at it. Titanium white is actually a great white. It's super opaque, very thick. I'm still going to put flake white in the list in case it's available in your country. It's still a very good pigment, but if you can't find some true, genuine flake white or Kremnitz white, you can find some substitutes which are actually titanium and zinc white. It's not the same, I agree, but that's just the way it is. Generally, I like to have two different white tubes, one which is very thick, opaque, and heavily textured, and another one which is more fluid and more comparable to flake white, less brutal and smoother in mixes. Also note that I don't use zinc white. There are a couple things that you need to be careful about when using zinc white. It can cause some issues. I'm not going to dive into the complexities of why zinc white might be dangerous for your paintings, but if you have my oil painting course or my color course, you will know all about it. Next, I have cadmium yellow light PY35. It's a clean, cool, strong yellow. This is my primary yellow. This is what resembles the most a true primary yellow. To be perfectly honest, I use it very rarely, but when I do, it's really because it's irreplaceable. And actually, there is nothing that compares to this color and nothing that can mix anything that resembles this. So, I mean, this yellow is not something that can be mixed. This is not something that can be said of many of the pigments that I have in my selection, but if you try to mix anything like that, I mean, good luck. You can mix a red like that with yellow and magenta, for example, but you can never mix a yellow like that. Of course, if you don't like cadmium, you can get a substitute like Henza yellow, PY3 or PY83. For my yellow, I also use a yellow ochre PY42. It's warm, earthy, it's excellent for skin tones and light mixtures. And if you know me, you know that I love my earth tones and I use them all the time. First of all, because they're quite cheap. Sure, you can mix a dull yellow like this out of a cadmium yellow, for example. But it would be just such a waste of money because the cadmium yellow is super expensive. So why not just use a simple yellow ochre like that and it works just fine. It's a simple yellow, it's super reliable, it will virtually never fade because this thing is still on cave paintings. Just note that PY42 is actually not a true natural ochre. It's a synthetic yellow iron oxide, but still it's a natural color that's found in nature and it's going to work great in most of your paintings. This is the yellow that I use most of the time. Now you have transparent red oxide or transparent iron oxide. Here they call it Mars orange, which is very weird. I mean, sometimes you should never trust the names of the paint tubes, just trust the little code. And this one is PR101 transparent. It's a rich, warm orange, perfect for glazes, shadow colors. For skin tones, it's just ideal. Sometimes it's called transparent burnt sienna. You have all types of names, but it's basically the same, PR101. It's one of the most useful pigments for skin tones because it has naturally the same hue as the skin. And because it is transparent, it's also really great for glazes. Now, something super important to note is that the composition alone doesn't make the color. Look at these two. This is transparent iron oxide, PR101, and this is Venetian red or English red, depending on the name, and it's also PR101, but this one is opaque and a lot more concentrated. It's a strong, earthy red with a very classical feeling. It's almost brick-like. It is very dense and concentrated, very opaque. I like to have both because for skin tones, sometimes you need transparency, sometimes you need opacity. So I can always switch between the two and cover the full range. Now you have one of my favorites, burnt umber. It's warm and dark, super useful. It dries fast and it's a wonderful brown. If you paint any figure portraits or animals or anything from the natural world, you will definitely need this brown. It's reliable and it's super fast drying. It's just great. And I really like this one by Winsor & Newton because it's also transparent, which makes it extremely useful for skin tones. I also have another version that's not transparent, that's more opaque or semi-opaque, and it's also useful, but this one definitely gets the most use from me. In the same category, we have raw umber, fast drying, cooler brown, less red-orange and more greenish, more on the greenish side, but it's great for values and structure. And it's also great to create neutral grays in combination with ivory black to create the classical grisaille palette. Here we have Pyrrole red, a vibrant, clean, warm. It's the same red that's used on the Ferraris. If you prefer, you can also use cadmium red medium, for example, whatever you want. Just a very bright red, opaque, mineral works really well. Here we have quinacridone rose. It's a powerful rose, great for mixing purples, magentas, create vivid accents, or to make glazes for skin tones and bring a nice pink touch to any portraits. And this one is also what I use as my magenta primary. It's not the ideal magenta technically, but it's the most useful kind of magenta-ish pigment that I found. I've tried some things that are more on the purple side, so technically that look more magenta. They are usually less useful than this one. Next we have ultramarine blue, which is essential for depth, shadows, cool contrast. I really use my ultramarine blue very often because I make all my blacks with a mix of burnt umber and ultramarine blue, so I use big quantities of it. This blue is super reliable. It creates a deep dark blue, and I found over the years that for the blue, the more you go towards the dark side and the deeper, the better it gets, because as you can see here, blue reaches its peak chroma for the darker values, unlike yellow, for example, which has its highest chroma for the lighter values. So with blue, don't be afraid to pick up a dark pigment because blue gets more intense in the darker range of values. I also have a black, even though I said earlier that I mix it with ultramarine blue and burnt umber most of the time. Really for the black, you can use either ivory black, which is more cool, or Mars black, which is much warmer. I found that Mars black mixes better with other pigments, and ivory black can cause some drying issues if you use too much. But anyway, since I use ultramarine blue and burnt umber most of the time for my mixes, I use so little of this one that I barely notice the effects. In fact, this black is only here for when I use it in a grisaille palette, in which case I would obviously use some white with it and some raw umber as well. So to play on the warm and the cool side, and in this case, the ivory black is the cool pigment. Next we have my baby, my favorite pigment, cobalt teal blue PG50. Brilliant, brilliant cyan color. And yes, this is a cyan. This is not a light blue. You need a cyan. I don't know how to tell you how game-changing it's going to be if you try to use a cyan. If you can't get the cobalt, you can also try your luck with a phthalo turquoise PB15 plus PG7. It's very strong, best used with control, but if you use it with white, you can achieve kind of the same hue. This turquoise blue, this cyan range is, you know, if you know my channel, this is my favorite pigment in the entire world. I always talk about it. I use it very often in flesh tones as well, because if something pulls too much on the red side in my skin tones, this color can kill it and bring it back to something more neutral. So it's kind of a complement to the red. So really use either one of them. The phthalo turquoise is great. It's a lot cheaper and more on the dark side, super intense. You can use it in glazes, and this one is really the one that I prefer because it's truly opaque and it's light. It works really well as such. It's like an opaque, it's almost like a yellow, but for the cool side of the color wheel. And finally we finish with phthalo green yellow shade, PG36. To be fair, this one is the one that I use the least. It's my primary green, so I have it. I very rarely use it. For example, for foliage and vegetation, I wouldn't even use it. I prefer to mix my greens in this case. But this one is still useful because it completes the color wheel for me. And yes, based on the principles of how I built this palette, I need a primary green. I need a pigment to fill up this space. And did you know that the human eye is most sensitive to the yellowish green light, by the way? specifically at the wavelength of around what this pigment is here. This means that the human eye is capable of perceiving more nuances of this than any other color of the wheel. You know that the eye has 3 types of cone cells responsible for color vision. You have red, green, and blue, but the overall sensitivity curve of the human eye peaks in the yellow-green region of the spectrum. So is green the most important color of all? Not really. Here it's important to distinguish between sensitivity and resolution in nuances, how many nuances the eye is capable of detecting in a certain range, and the cultural perception. Overall, green is not a very interesting range of hue for humans. We kind of treat it as, yeah, it's all the same, it's just green. Although we do perceive it with more nuances than any other. But that's how it is. We are just a lot more attracted to nuances around the yellow, orange, and red ranges, or even blue, meaning that we will focus more intensely on nuances there and overlook our green vision superpower most of the time. Now, a little bonus pigment that I use to paint fire effects and flames is this cadmium orange, a really pretty color, really useful, but it's usually not in my primary list unless I need to paint some crazy light effects. So there you go, this is my go-to palette. Also important to note is that some of these pigments aren't just in there for their color, but also sometimes for their drying time, their opacity, their cost, or their convenience to use. For example, yellow ochre, I could easily replace it, but it's just so convenient. It dries perfectly, it's light fast, it has all the benefits of being a super opaque, great yellow that I use in most of my skin tones. Why would I use something more expensive that doesn't dry the right way? It's going to cause a lot of headaches during the mixing process, when I can have this very useful, convenienced, earth tone, reliable pigment. After that, the thing is that selection might not be the right one for you. I can guarantee that it's pretty cool and you can try it, but it also depends on how you paint. For example, if you work at a prima, you can remove some of the transparent pigments in there because they're going to be annoying most of the time for you. If you paint alla prima, you want something more opaque, something that you can build thick brushstrokes with. And the transparent pigments are mostly going to be annoying. So what you can do is you can try to find the same color, but in an opaque version. What you want to do is go around the color wheel, find which pigments you think are going to be what you need. This is exactly how I built my go-to palette, and this is exactly how I recommend that you build yours. Based on how you paint and what your needs are. Don't just pick colors because they work for others. Pick colors because you know what they do. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. If you liked it, remember to leave a thumbs up before you go. Subscribe to support the channel. Again, a huge thank you to my Patreon and YouTube members. This video wouldn't be possible without your support. If you want to join the community, you'll find a link in the description below. That's it for this video, my friends. Check out this one next, and as always, joy and inspiration to you.